And good morning. It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And he's ready to go. Your host, Mike Hewitt.
Always feels like he's going to introduce Wayne Dinkerson or something like that when he gets to that spot, but I guess you have to be old enough to know that joke. Hey, good morning, West Michigan. Just a little bit of quick introduction as we go. Pax is here, and as you can tell, Brian Thomas is here keeping us on path. Ludwig von Wiedendorsky and our often co-host Miles Bauer online with us from the great state of Illinois. Somewhere this morning we're going to be joined by George Moss, but listen, just to get this first segment going, I want to read a little paragraph that I put on Facebook yesterday, and I have to tell you first, I got a lot of people angry with me and a whole bunch of people that liked this. I got some nasty grams and then a lot of compliments. But listen, it's what I feel about where we're at right now. And so I'm reading a text while we're talking. It kind of took me off path. George Moss is trying to dial in and says he's getting a busy signal. I don't know. The technical people are giving me the what look. Okay, here it is from Facebook while Brian Thomas figures out what we're trying to figure out. Okay, I might be a dinosaur, but I'm right. That's how I started this humble piece off. Whatever we think we're gaining by having both parents work is not worth allowing public schools, the internet, TV, and pop culture to raise our children. And there's no upside to a 300% increase just since 1970 in single parenthood. If that's really just a lifestyle choice, it's an extremely poor one. Indeed, the further America strays from a nuclear family guided by faith, marshaled by a stay-at-home parent, and funded by a working parent, the more out of control our national circumstance will become. And listen, I believe that. But when I say it, I have to do the extras, not to be politically correct, but to be realistic. I've been a single parent. I get it. We talked about this on the show before. Sometimes in the course of life, that's just the way it is. I understand that. What I'm railing against is a culture that says that this is the way it could be, should be, and ought to be, that we've now got over a 50% level of it. And we've talked about in the past when we look to Jackson Prison or Joliet Prison as it used to be and say, who are the people in there? Overwhelmingly, by far, not like 5 or 10%, like 80% are from single parent or no parent family structures. And so when I look to our culture, I think, why in the world would we advocate for such a thing? I don't get that. So one of the reasons I was hoping to get George connected, I'm not sure what the issue was with the technical thing, but George is a lecturer at U of M, and he was a principal at a Flint school district. He's been on the show before. He's one of my favorite guests. But he's just got such a strong background. And him and I were exchanging recently. And he gave me some insight that made me feel a little bit better about it. But listen, while we wait for Brian Thomas to figure out how to get George, Miles, what do you think on this topic? Am I wet? Am I being sensational? What do you think?
Well, I think, as of late, the economic conditions have really kind of put people into a situation where they had to have a two-income earner household, and that's just really a factor of, the economic landscape that our fair administration has presented us with over the last 8 years.
Listen, the problem, I agree with that, by the way, but the problem for me is that this has been going on a long time. What was that crazy lady's name that debated with Dan Quayle? And she was and advocated that this is a lifestyle choice. And folks, I got to tell you, it absolutely frightens me to think about what our society will be like in 15 years when the babies that were born last year, 48% to single-parent homes, when they become teenagers. And I go, wow, if we think we got a bumpy road now, all we need again to do is to look at the society of those who are not graduating, those who have get in trouble with the law, those that are runaways, those that have, the whole list of negatives are streaming from that. That's overwhelming.
Well, I think this issue, or issues like this, stream back more to the 60s time period when we saw a change in the way perception happened. Before that, promiscuous people weren't seen as good. You didn't let people know that. And then in the 60s, free love and peace happened, and things changed. And then promiscuity came out. Then also, if you even go into the 90s, we go further in how this has become even more relevant with single families happening, the internet. You're no longer just to your own location on finding somebody, or you meet somebody on the internet from California that you like, and that separates families. Sometimes being a single parent isn't by choice. And that's the hard part. I think the choice people, we almost go down to that 1%, like we talk with transgender and all the other things. It's such a minuscule on the choice, lifestyle choice. I don't think a lot of people choose this as much as it ends up happening.
Listen, I don't agree with you. I think that and by the way, folks, when I talk about single parenthood or the 48% last year that were born to unwed mothers, I'm not talking teen pregnancies. The overwhelming majority of them are born to 20s and 30-somethings women, and many of them women have absolutely no intentions whatsoever of being with whoever the father was that fathered the child.
So do you think that a baby is like the new Chihuahua?
I don't know that I want to go
I'm saying like
there.
it's like an accessory. Like, look at me, I got a baby.
I think that marriage itself has become a negative. That's what I think. And commitment has become a negative. And those things that I think it's commitment. I also think, by the way, it's self-respect. I think that the terminology or the concept of self-respect has changed tremendously. What it means to have self-respect has
Think about
Go ahead.
One thing, though, Mike, is that in some cases, some of these girls have babies because their family is so blown apart that now they have another person with which they can interact with and they can love, and that they perceive getting love back, and that these girls are just looking for something to love because their family is just blown all to pieces.
There's probably some truth to that. It may be a whole bunch of little things that are causing a big, gigantic problem. The problem that I have with it is that pulp culture in general and our government in total are funding it and causing it to be something that is positive. Well, listen, like I said when I started this, and I've said before, I have been a single parent. I get divorce. I get the reality of life. There was a dear friend of mine from Green Bay, Wisconsin, when I posted a similar item on my Facebook page a couple months ago, in fact, that she just wrote me an email, just excoriated me because, from her point of view, she had lost her husband to cancer and they had just adopted a child. She said, "This is something I feel blessed with, but it wasn't a lifestyle choice." Mm-hmm. I get that, but that's not the kind of circumstance. That child that she adopted, or that they adopted, won't be ending up in Joliet prison. I mean, or the likelihood is slim. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about those folks that don't have a safety net, that don't have a plan, that don't have an education. They're not equipped to be partners in education with teachers. But they're having children anyway. And you go, wait a minute, this truly is not a lifestyle choice. I wonder who's giving us the beep tone.
Miles, you're pretty up to date on things. You ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yes, I did.
Does that not kind of almost seem like real life today?
Yeah, I mean, it is very, very true. But you know, I think Mike's swerved into something when he said this has got a lot of tentacles to it. There's not one central issue going on with this. I think there's welfare questions involved in this. There's government involved in this. There's society involved in this. There's culture involved in this. I don't think this is a straightforward issue. I think this is a bunch of different issues piling up.
I think you're probably exactly right with that.
Oh, yeah.
The question, though, is as a society, when we can sit in, we don't have to speculate what the end result is in total. Again, there's going to be success stories in these numbers. So those folks that are driving on the road yelling at me right now, please understand, I get that. There are going to be success stories. And in fact, I think that when I was a single parent, and now when I look, by the way, folks, one of the persons that yelled at me yesterday was my daughter. Okay, I mean, pounded me, because in her view, you went through exactly what we've gone through, and what you're describing is us. And I think your 4 daughters turned out just fine, Dad. But she was right. The problem with it is that I'm not doing the micro; I'm doing the macro. And when I look at what's going on in the United States in total, I really am afraid for our future culture I perceive it as it's unwinding.
And you're talking more about the single parent, that the dad may not even be known. They're not involved in the life. You know, my mom ended up becoming a single mom, and she had to play both roles. My dad came around still, so we had him still around. But they're, like you're saying, is these 30-something-year-olds getting pregnant, having no intention of the child having a father, is what you're referring to. Not the divorcees who end up still both parenting the child. Is that right?
I think so.
Because then you still have both parents involved. You're not talking about you're talking about single parent, but both parents are still there.
Yeah, but let me tell you something on that, and I can speak to that a little bit. You're talking about divorce?
Well, yeah, because that a lot of times
is that what
we're seeing that's where the single parents are coming from.
Well, but 2 things. First off, last year, when we looked at those 48% numbers, many of those folks, in fact, the majority of those mothers, didn't have, according to the surveys at least, didn't have any interest. There was no desire. The goal was not to marry the father.
Yeah.
That was not part of it. But to divorce, to that specific, we're going to do a show on that one of these days. Because in my view, friend of the court and the family court system in total is the single most broken branch of government that there is. I think what goes on in our judiciary, at least as it pertains to families, is an absolute embarrassment to the United States' culture in total. Mm-hmm. It's a frickin' train wreck what they do. And most of it's not biased to gender, like I think a lot of folks think. Most of it is a whole bunch of preconceived notions that frankly don't make any sense, and they're advanced by people that are grossly underqualified. And what you see, the result of that is a lot of children put in and they become pawns in a great game. And the lawyers involved, by the way. If there isn't a fight between the parents, the lawyers will find one, because that's where the do-re-mi is. And you know who pays? The children pay. Miles, you've lived it. I've lived it. I know you've lived it with your parents, Matt. And anyone that thinks that our judiciary is perfect, they've never spent any time in a moderate or large-sized courtroom, and they've certainly never had their family go to reach resolution in an adversarial system, which is, that in itself to me is insane. We're having a lot of problems. Let's seek an adversarial system for resolution. Well, brilliant. Thank you. That works great when we're deciding if you're guilty. It doesn't work so well for making children have a safe path forward with both parents involved. Am I crazy again, Miles?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we have a system that was designed to settle disputes between, you went on my property and you shot my horse or something like that. And now they tried to corkscrew that system into family law, and it just does not translate, because I think the only thing they're really accomplishing is they're just attempting to keep as many people as they can off of welfare, and they're trying to hide that behind the guise of, well, we're trying to figure out what's best for the children. Well, I don't know if they're necessarily accomplishing what they're attempting to do. Going back to your other point, though, I would say that not only to do with the culture, but I think that the degradation of the effectiveness of the public education system is also contributing to your point about why the children are no longer really effective citizens within society coming from broken homes.
Let me get my head around that a little bit, Miles. Tell me, what do you think the 1 or 2 key fundamental problems are out of what you just said? Because you just said a whole bunch.
Relative to family law or relative to public education?
But your choice, because
okay.
both of them are integral in what we're dealing with right now?
Yeah, so, I mean, as I was going through my divorce in the state of Illinois, they were more interested in ensuring that mom was well funded, regardless what that meant to dad. And it also kind of assumed that a divorce was coming about because of infidelity. And as we both know, divorces don't always come from somebody cheating on somebody. But if you read the Illinois state law, it just assumes that's the reason why you're going through a divorce.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There are certainly a lot of assumptions going forward. One thing is for certain, within the parenting structure, there's a lot of ego issues, there's a lot of hurt feelings, there's a lot of anger and all kind of things that are attached to it. And in my view, the judiciary, the lawyers, and the whole entire complex, rather than looking for ways of resolution, they actually inflame those feelings. And I think that's wrong, just hugely wrong. The other thing is we spend so much time in the United States talking about defending ourselves from divorce, and I'm not convinced that, and we've talked about this on the show before, I just had a couple things pop into my head from shows gone by, but we don't spend a lot of time in the United States teaching our young why and how to get married and what marriage is and what the commitment is and why it's good, but why it takes a lot of work to make it work. Instead, we talk about divorce lawyers and I'm not sure we're taking that from the right end of the stick. Listen, folks, we're overdue with going to a break. So hopefully when we're on break, we can figure out our technical issue with George Moss. But in any case, we're going to let some sponsors help us, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mike Hewitt Show.
RenegadeRiver.com is new and used firearms, all priced to sell, plus ammo, reloading supplies, optics, clothing, lasers, and yes, tactical gear. RenegadeRiver.com, family owned right here in Michigan, because you deserve it.
This is News Talk 1090 WKEZ and Talk 1230 WTKG.
And this is the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. Segment 2 has started.
It is started. Listen, I got to tell you, I want to come back at some point and do a show on the judiciary because I think that there's just a huge thing that we need to dig into. Maybe we can get to someone within the lawyering industry that will actually talk about it on a frank basis. That said, what I do want to do is I want to segue a little bit to a different topic, if I might, folks. There's, of all of the differences between Hillary and Trump, there's one that's probably most striking to me, and that's their interpretation of the southern border, or more specifically, immigration in general. And let me pause before I go forward. For those folks that are not familiar with this show, if you watch it on YouTube, you will often see a ship go by as one of the images that Matt Wiedenhoeft puts together when he puts the YouTube. And the reason that ship is on there is that's the ship that brought the Hewitt family over. I tell you that because I'm not, like most people, all people, I'm a part of immigration, so I'm not against it. But you have to have a process. We've always had a process that over the last 45 years or so seems to have disintegrated to no process. Now it reminds me of the Fred Flintstone in the cat exchange where the big saber-toothed cat throws Fred out the front door and he goes in and throws the cat out and the cat goes in. You go, wait, stop. That's not an immigration process. So then when I look to this current election cycle, and Donald Trump is right when he says he has pushed this topic into the front of everyone's view, like him or like it or not, it's a massive reality problem in the United States, and he's got us talking about it. So I think he's spot on with that, but you can't just listen to Trump without saying, okay, what does the other half roughly of the United States think when they look at it? That causes me to pause and look at Hillary and perhaps Bernie and say, what are they espousing? What's their view? And Hillary appears to be calling for a blanket amnesty for those folks that are currently here in the United States. And part of the problem is that we don't even have a definition of what here in the United States currently means in terms of numbers. We have heard government numbers, and we talked about it on the show before, we've heard government numbers that range anywhere from 11 million to 19 million. And folks, I passionately believe it's well north of 40 million. But even at their numbers, we're talking about the equivalent of the total population of 3 average states. That's a lot of people. And so when you're saying, who are we just blanket amnestying to, I think it's important to define that. But Miles, where are you on this question of amnesty and the southern border?
Well, I would say this. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Remember back in 1986, Reagan's amnesty. And Ted Kennedy took to the Senate floor and he said, okay, we only have to do this one more time and then we'll get it right. Fast forward, 24 years, and now we're back to another amnesty again. Clearly, Washington's broken on this. I get why the Democrats like it, because if they grant blanket amnesty, they get a lot more voters. It's the reason why California used to be a solid Republican state. Now it's a solid Democrat state. So I totally get that. But
do you think that, Miles, let me stop you for just a second. Because I think California is a very important example for us to look at. I think a lot of folks, when they look at California and they say, okay, it's far left, and they think that's because of moon bats and they're just far left, and UCLA or Berkeley and hippies and San Francisco. They in other words, they paint it with a whole bunch of stereotype reasons about why it's gone so far left from when it first elected and then reelected Ronald Reagan. But I think that you're exactly right, that it has nothing to do with those trends. It's got vastly more to do with the southern border. And it's not just changed the shade. It's not like mixed it purple. It has shifted it far left. And we've got to use that as an example to say, is that what we want for the United States? That's really the question in my mind, is do we want the United States to look like California? Is that the right question?
Yeah, I mean, and, the other question, and again, I know that the charge is that you're a xenophobe if you are opposed to this. How do we know that the existing immigration laws that have already passed Congress and have already been signed by a president, how do we know if they work or not if they're not even being enforced? I don't know that we necessarily have a broken immigration system. I think we've got a broken government.
Let me tell you where I think we've got a broken immigration system. Is that an example? There's a friend of mine in the Grand Haven area that came here from Argentina. It took him many, many years and many, many thousands of dollars. Almost the entire life course of his children growing up is literally how long it took him to come to the United States. And it didn't take that long for my folks to come across and get processed through Ellis Island so that they knew who my family was and they knew we weren't bringing diseases and they knew that we weren't here to try to flip the government. It didn't take them a decade, and it didn't take them many thousands of fees and tax. And you go, wait a minute, what's all that have to do with it? So I am convinced, at least personally, I'm convinced that the immigration system is broken, although I agree with you, whatever that system is not being followed. And one of the things that's about our government that I find extremely distressing, and it's probably where you and I agree most, Miles, is that we've got rules on the books that they don't follow at all. They just like Hillary with her emails. I mean, in what, I don't want to be cliche, but who can get away with doing whatever they want, except for people in power in Washington, D.C. That to me, it goes to the immigration problem. So,
yeah, I completely agree. Which is, I think, going back to one of our other points about, how you always like to point at the people, and I always like to point at Washington. I think this is an excellent example where I think, the people have no say in here per se, other than to attempt to elect those who would go in there and attempt to enforce the laws or change the laws. But this is really kind of one where Washington decides, as well as the sanctuary cities, which are also a big problem. Why can't we defund them from federal money if they decide to no longer observe the law? I mean, that's just chaos.
It is. It's to me, It's because there's an agreement in Washington, D.C., even if it's an unspoken agreement, there's agreement with enough of our elected leadership with those sanctuary cities that's why the faucet continues to go. And by the way, on that point, I'm a little bit different than Trump and Hillary on this position, as at least relates to illegal immigration, because the United States funds illegal immigration. We give those folks vastly more of our taxes than a citizen gets and you pause and you go, what if we just turn the financial faucet off? What would happen? I think a significant portion of the illegal immigrants, without knowing that they could come to a sanctuary city and get free health care, free education, free home, free utility bills, they get all that. And the answer is, yeah, they really do. Why are we doing that? Why are we saying, please come sneak across our border and we'll fund your life? Why are we doing that?
Create voters.
That's insane. But they're doing but listen, remember, I'm a Jeffersonian who and I can't quote him, I can't even paraphrase it, other than to say that when you take someone's taxes for things that they abhor or disbelieve, that's a form of tyranny. Mm-hmm. This is him, not me, and I agree with him. It is tyranny to say, I don't care if you like it or not, this is what we're doing. One of the things that I was hoping, we can't get George on the phone because of some technical issues, but one of the things that caught my eye with George in our exchanges, and I think it goes to what Miles is saying, he says, and I quote him, the good news is that there are more people awake now than ever before. The trend is heading in a more positive direction. And I think, I don't want to put words in George's mouth, but I think he's along the same line with Miles Bauer saying, we've had enough. Am I right? That's what I think.
Yeah.
Because all of these things, which is, when you look at them in total, we have got to stop them.
Trump didn't run in 2012.
And you know, Mike, going back to your Jeffersonian quote there, the one thing we're going to have to struggle with the country is this whole birthright question. Can I just stumble across the border, spit out a baby, and then that baby is necessarily a citizen? And that is huge throughout our history. The Supreme Court has always upheld that. But I think we're kind of in a different world now. So I don't know. I can't, standing strong with the original intent versus the situation that we're seeing today, I struggle with myself on that.
I got to tell you, to me, it's always about money, Miles. First off, I get your feeling, although I'll give you kudos for not being very politically correct. I busted out laughing on this end, but the
hey, I mean, isn't that the cornerstone of the whole Trump movement? Is that we're not politically correct?
Yeah, that's a very true statement. Here's the problem, though. That wouldn't be the case if it weren't for federal funding. I still again maintain that this is about follow the money, and when I follow the money, there is absolutely no cause for a person to cross the border to give birth to a child when there's no money here waiting, when there is no promise of that child becoming an anchor baby and turning into a funding source through federal, state, and local assistance. To me, it's about the money if we want to stop the problem. And by the way, where I disagree with Trump on this, and probably you, is I don't care if the wall is 500 feet tall. To me, it's the same as the war on drugs. As long as there's a market, as long as there's funding, those folks will find a way to get their families here. And by the way, I don't entirely blame them, but let's make it an even playing field, because there's no funding there to live and do nothing, and there's no funding here to live and do nothing. That's the way it should be in my mind. I have to go to work every day. Now, you're with the wall, correct? You want the wall?
Yeah, I mean, but I think there is a lot of symbolism around the whole Trump idea, because even the very issue of the wall is emblematic of something that is not Hillary or the Democrats. I think it's more of a philosophy of, you know what, let's hire Americans first for jobs.
Right.
Okay, let's not hide behind this idea, food prices will go up if we have to hire Americans. I think that is a ruse. Okay, that is just a way to deal with this in the media. I think that there are just people, they are tired of losing their jobs.
Right.
They're tired of this whole sanctuary city thing. They're tired of this whole Kate issue out in
Sure. Yep. With
San Francisco
with the
when
shooting,
she got shot.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, and it's just all piling up. And I get that the Democrats want the votes.
Right.
But I think there is so much backlash associated with those votes that's what's bringing people around. That's why Trump is able to tap into this to build enthusiasm.
I got to tell you, part of what you said, and I by the way, I agree with all of it, but part of what you said that I'm going to draw us back to, it's the concept that Americans don't want those jobs. And that insults my intelligence on two levels. First off, we fought a civil war to end slavery, and for an entire majority or near majority group of people to say it's okay to have second-class citizens because we can pay them less and our economy is better for it. I just go, what? That was about as anti what I hope we've become after fighting a civil war as can be. That's part one of it. And part two of it is when I was a kid, I picked apples. That's what I did. And so nowadays they say, well, the kids don't want to do those things anymore. That's because they don't have to. And it's a funding problem again. If they want some dough, make them work for it. And if we have kids that have no work ethic, or we're wondering why our schools didn't teach them critical thinking skills, part of the missing ingredient is that we didn't cause them to work themselves, like picking apples. I learned real quick that if I picked my apples, I had money. Now, that gave me a sense of freedom, but with it came a sense of necessity for judgment. And it's a funny thing. It was a joke with my daughters growing up, because when they bought something, they said, well, no, Dad, I paid for that with my money. So the joke was, how come your money's more valuable than my money? But it goes to had to work for it. And I think that's important. And it's one of the ingredients that seems to be kicked aside or really mislabeled in this conversation, I believe. I think you're right, Miles, don't misunderstand me. But to say that they'll do it and we won't is, first off, idiocy. When I watched a big store get built over in Coopersville, and the drywall team, there was only one person in the entire drywall team that spoke English. And there's no question in my mind that everyone on that drywall team was an illegal immigrant, an undocumented Democrat. There's no question in my mind who those folks were. Yes, they were working. No, they were not contributing to the federal, state, and local tax system, but yes, they were working. And they were working in a job that I used to do. Yeah. So you go, wait a minute. Yes, we will.
It's a trade.
It's a trade, but I'm not willing to voluntarily make it.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
a trade job. That drywalling is a legitimate business that people are starting, and now they're competing against that. Listen, I know that you've met Fritz. His kids.
Tell everyone who Fritz is.
My mom's friend. He's from the Netherlands.
Can't understand a word he says.
No, I've known him for almost 20 years. I still can't.
Fritz, what'd you say? He'll say it again. What?
Yeah, and the funny thing is Siri understands him.
Yeah.
Siri doesn't understand me on my phone, but understands Fritz.
And we don't understand you either. Listen, I've got to stop everyone. We've got to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to dive into the Enigma Report, which today I'm asking the great profound question of what does liberalism have to do with progressivism? So we'll be back in just a minute.
This is the Mike Hewitt Show.
Renegade River, guns and ammo, and so much more. Old-fashioned service with surprisingly low prices. On M104 at the top of the new 231 bypass in Utica. Or find us at renegaderiver.com, because you deserve it.
3, 2, 1, 0.
And the Mike Hewitt Show is brought to you by renegaderiver.com. Put your ear to the rail. Can you hear what's coming? Is that a locomotive? No. Is that Superman? No. It is the Enigma Report.
Miles must be sitting in Illinois going, what are we listening to? Listen, before I get into the Enigma Report, I got to hold up a bag because we are streaming on Facebook right now. And PAX gave me the bag when I got to the station, or when they got to the station this morning. So, Pax, I just wanted to pause in the Enigma Report and say thank you very much. What was in the bag, folks, is a donut that's as big as my head. And anyone if you're watching the streaming, you know I don't need a donut. But
No, we put it on panoramic.
But nice, thanks. These are my friends, I'm telling you. It's a tough world. But the reason for the donut is today, speaking of our sponsors, today is the 4th anniversary for Renegade River. So, Pax, thank you very, very much for the gigantic-sized donut.
Welcome.
That's very nice of him. It's a good thing we got him in here, I'm telling you. Listen, on the Enigma today, what causes me pause is I use this. I'm an originalist. I'm sorry. I'm a constitutional originalist. And so when I look at things from that vantage point and I think of words like liberal, and then I try to think of words like liberal progressivism, they don't add up. Because in my world, a liberal wants freedom from tyranny. They don't want an oppressive and overwhelming government. They want to push the king off. They want you, if you work harder than me, they want you to have the right and the freedom for your employer to pay you more. And not the same. So I'm sleeping in my chair and you're driving. You're making more than me or we're making the same. To me, those are the tenets of socialism, and I rail against them. And where I'm getting at, folks, is there is absolutely no application to the word liberalism anywhere. It has nothing to do with the word progressivism. And so every time I hear them talk about that, I think, you guys are all liars. Stop it. Quit trying to change the fundamental meaning of words, because I believe words have meaning. What say you, Miles Bauer?
So I completely agree with you, but I think there's one nuance that I think you need to bring out in that liberalism espouses equality,
Yep.
and it's equality so that you and I don't have to serve a king, but it is not equality from a socialistic perspective.
Liberalism was supposed to be that way. That's what it meant. That's what Jefferson, who considered himself a liberal, that's what I think he believed in, was that yes, there is equality. So the majority shouldn't be in a position to squelch the minority, which is why we had a founding father defend a guy that shot some of our people, because he deserved the right to have a fair and just trial. I think those things are basic tenets, frankly, to the small r, don't get mad at me, folks, to the small r concept of a Republican form of government, is that you have equal justice in the eyes of the law. But it doesn't mean that I should work my butt off while you sleep and we make the same amount of money when we're employed to do the same function. Or that, to use your example when we were off during the segment break, if your 16-year-old son is working at the local grocery store and this young man just works his butt off and he thinks hard and he achieves and he succeeds more than the other folks, why should he make the same amount as them when they come in and do the basics, punch the clock, and skate? I don't. As an employer, the employer should want to reward people, and I see minimum wage as a big, gigantic blanket excuse for businesses not to have to reward success. And to some of your points, they're also the foundation tenets for unionism. And in fact, I maintain, I'll go you a step further, I think that they're the training grounds for unionism. That's what I think. So what do you think?
Yeah, I can see your point, but I think the point I was trying to get at. So I get the equality within the law. My only hesitation in there is that if you extend that out too much, you can begin to say attorneys should make the same money as my 16-year-old son does at the grocery store, as the computer person does at a corporation, and then you get into that level of socialism. So I think there's a distinction between equal in the eyes of the law versus equal across society.
We're there.
We're where?
At this point of what Miles is saying, when they're talking $15 an hour, we're there. My wife, who has a 2-year degree, a semester away from her 4-year, makes less than $13 an hour in the medical field. And at $15 an hour means then she now would have to be moved up too. It's not just fast food. She would now have to be too, and she'd be on the same level as the guy serving her lunch at McDonald's without a degree, without any training, And possibly even 16 years old, which we know that between the 16 and 18-year-old range will go away.
Yeah, but we got to pause for a minute. Part of the thing goes to definitions. And Miles was right early on, I think it was during the segment break, when he says it depends on your definition of, in this case, the word liberalism. Because to me, the definition is that the other side on this argument will point to those jobs at the fast food joints and say, that's not enough money for a family income.
It was never made to
and
be
it wasn't meant to be a family income. But in terms of the lawyer, when you get the Grand Rapids telephone book out and look up attorney, there's like 40 pages of in the yellow pages. Well, the yellow pages are almost gone now.
Do you know what a phone book is? Most people may not even know what a phone book is.
For a minute, you stared at me, phone book? What is that? But the point is that there's just a blob of them. There's a whole bunch of lawyers. The result of that is that those lawyers that are average or less than average, or at least can't market themselves properly, whether they're good or bad, aren't going to make as much.
Yeah.
But that to me goes to capitalism. What's that word? Meritocracy? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
To me, what's your merit? What's your experience? What are you going to give me as an employee to an employer? And based on that, I want to reward you, not because you're wonderful, but because I want to keep you. And if you're not much of an employee, if you're just here to coast, we're probably going to say bye. That's what's going to happen.
The people are forgetting the law of economics with elasticity in this whole scenario, wages. There's a point where the elasticity to have an employee is going to be by far not manageable, or a company's not willing to do it, and they're going to find a way to replace it, and they have. It's called a machine.
Yeah. Did you see when you go to the superstores now? Doesn't matter what flavor superstore you want to go to. You walk in there and there'll be a huge line of cash register counters, and one or two cashiers, and then a gigantic bank of computers where you check yourself in.
If you go in after 10, there's no cashiers anymore. It's all self-checkout.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They're saving money, and I can tell you they did not reduce the cost of their items to save money. Their items are staying the same price, even though they're saving money on those machines.
I don't know if I would be interested to see a study on that.
In the long term, they're absolutely saving money between the state taxes, the FICA, all the taxes, there's the unemployment benefits, the health care benefits. They're saving a ton.
So
of
what
money.
we're doing is we're costing if we're trying to get an entry level position, which folks, that's what that is. It's not a career. If I'm out trying to get an entry level position and I'm demanding more than that position is worth, I've effectively priced myself out of the market, and I've been replaced by a machine in much the same way that I believe the United States has priced itself out of the global market. Mm-hmm. We demand so much that it's just not always there. And if there's another alternative, path of least resistance is going to have that alternative.
That's capitalism,
be the
right?
choice. Absolutely.
I mean, if you're a lawyer, you can be the best in town. You're charging $500 an hour, and everybody's hiring you. Like, I'm the best. I'm going to go to $1,000 an hour, and then
if you generate
nobody hires you because you're too much.
Right.
Now, my uncle did this. He increased his rate that I need to lower my clients. I'm going to double my rate. He doubled his clients. He said, I'm going to double it again. I'm trying to actually take less people on.
He wanted to take less on.
He wanted to take less on, so he'd price himself out of the market. He ended up making himself elite.
Listen, now, we've got 3 minutes, I think, left. But on that note, I have a very personal relationship with the logic you just explained. Once upon a time, I owned a restaurant, and I was losing my butt. We had standing room only, and somebody created a little Commodore 64 program, and the analysis of it was, your menu's all wrong, you need to raise your prices. And I said, if I do, I'll lose my customers. Well, for every dollar right now you take in, it costs you $1.25. Maybe you better be better off if you lost some customers. Miles, do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, that stands out right now on top of my head to this day. I assure you that that's a lesson that the free market will teach you. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're trying to be everything to everybody, it may not work. Yeah. So get very good at what you're good at, and then charge what the market will bear. That is capitalism. And
you're only valued. And my dad used to tell me this. I'd go, "Oh, this baseball card's worth this." He'd go, "No, it's only worth what somebody's willing to give you."
See, he's telling me we're losing. Raise your prices. We'll lose. Nah, you won't lose.
Yeah.
But there is a balance in there that's got to be found. I think all of those things go to the original concept of the Enigma right now. when you try to do micro or macro on what the true definitions of these words are, progressivism versus liberalism, they don't line up. Keeping in mind, I am a meritorious guy. I look for meritocracy. I look to original meanings. I think those things are important. So, Miles, am I crazy on this?
No, I think, but I mean, the problem with that is that the people who can't live up to the grade, they're the ones that go out and look for the politicians to make sure that you don't have a voice.
I think you're absolutely right. Listen, folks, we've got 1 minute, so just a little heads up. Next week, if all things go right technically, we'll have 2 Michigan Supreme Court justices join us. And then I think the week after, we're going to have the president of I can't even give the whole title. I'll put it on Facebook, folks. Find us on / the Mike Hewitt Show and follow us on Twitter.
Get out to Renegade River. 4th anniversary.
4th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, who thought?
I got nobody.
That's thought. And listen, Miles, one of these days we've got to get you to drive over here and sit in the studio for one of these shows.
All right.
That didn't sound like a really strong commitment, did it? All right, folks, follow us on Facebook, and we'll let you know what's coming up. I appreciate you very much joining us today, and we'll see you next week at 9 a.m.